Hello everyone, hello again, and welcome back to the Danske Bank UNI series of Agile lectures. And today we have a lecture number 4. You already heard about what is an empirical way of working. You heard a bit of how planning is being done in Agile way. You heard about how to manage dependencies in an Agile environment. And today we'll talk a bit about how to actually manage clients or how to work with the client relationships in an Agile manner. Sometimes we think that Agile is only about the developing things. But Agile is as much of a building relationships with your clients, with your customers, with your stakeholders, as it is in any kind of other way of working. And even more important in empirical way of working, actually, because the client stands in the very center of what we aim to achieve at the end. My name is Šedys. Hello once again, and today let's move to see of what an Agile client relationship looks like. So I want to start with actually the very essence of when the client comes to you and asks for something, how do you understand what he wants? And the usual manner is actually to understand the output of what our client asks from us. But what we want to give him is actually the outcome. Now, what is the difference between these two? Let me illustrate you with the actually very plain example. The client comes to you and says, I need an egg. So this would be an output, right? He wants a chicken egg. So you would just take a chicken egg and give it to the client. So that would, in this case, you would have delivered specifically what kind of output the client wanted. Now, in Agile way of working, we tend to ask what actually outcome you would like to achieve with this egg. Because maybe he will boil this egg and eat it. Maybe he wants to fry this egg and also eat it. In those two cases, client just wants to be full. He wants to eat, right? But different things, very different things. Now, maybe the client actually doesn't even want to eat the egg. Maybe he wants to, hatch the chicken and create his own chicken farm and raise his own chickens and have a lot of eggs. Maybe this is the end outcome of what our client expects. So whenever the client comes to us, the Agile way of working empowers us to actually focus on the outcome of what our client actually needs. Now, in today's lecture, I will show you how this is empowered in Agile way of working, how we try to focus on the outcome, and what is the main benefits of this thinking. Now, if the client needs different things, he needs some kind of outcomes, it also gives a perspective of what we give to the client, right? If he asks for egg, we give an egg. If he asks for dinner, we might think of, giving maybe one kind of egg or other kind of egg. If he wants to boil it, bake it, maybe, eat it without even baking or boiling it. So it definitely is different with what then our team works with. Because in this case, if we've been asked for a specific output, we might just sit and discuss a lot and plan a lot of how to, how this outcome should look like. Maybe we'll have different perspectives. So what is it actually client needs? Why we need to deliver this egg, and so on and so far. So there would be a lot of question marks usually and a lot of discussions, which eats time and creates inefficiencies. Now, when we are asked to deliver an outcome, it's much easier for us to understand, pack it, and then deliver it, right? So we might just give him a specific product that matches his required outcome. So this is the essence of thinking in client relationship in Agile way. Now, how we are doing this? First and foremost, the most important thing is we gather feedback from our clients. And we not only gather feedback, we do this in short cycles. So in the very beginning, we ask a client what kind of outcome he wants. we give him something, we show him something, he evaluates it, maybe he's not that happy in this case, right? We move on, we ask another time, what is your feedback? Maybe he's not happy, but he's more happy. And we do this in short cycles till our client is as happy as it could be. As happy as we can make him to be happy. So in these cases, as you can see, the short feedback loops is basically empowered by the short iterations that we already talked about in the previous lectures, us being able to deliver a working products, increments of working products, and getting the feedback. And we talk about short cycles. By the short, I mean really short. Sometimes it's not even weeks, sometimes maybe it's days. When we can just ask the client whether we are going to the right direction. So how the short feedback loops work, let me illustrate you with the example of a rocket and a car. I just like to give this example. Now imagine, your client wants to get from point A to point B. In one case, we might want to fly him with a rocket. What this would basically mean is that we would plan everything, put him to the rocket, everything is as precise as possible because, you know, rocket science, and then he just flies to the Mars or the Moon or anywhere else he wants to get. Now, in this case, we sort of teach the client to ask for a very specific things, ask for outputs usually. Now, what we want to do in a client relationship building, when we work in Agile way, we want to create a relationship where we teach the client to drive his business and go along with him. Now, an example could be, imagine you wake up in the morning and you need to get from your home to your work, to your office. Now, you start going, and do you really know every turn you will make, every traffic light that you need to stop at, every time you will need to change the lane? You might know the approximate road that you usually go, you might know the goal, which is your office, where you want to get at, but at the end, there might be a lot of things that could happen on the way, right? There might be a car accident and you will need to switch the lanes. There might be, traffic lights that sometimes maybe you will pass it, sometimes you will need to stop it. There might be some incidents, there might be roadworks. Anything could happen when we will need to just make some changes along the way. Maybe you'll need to change the route, maybe you'll need to change the lane, you need to stop or go faster, depending on the circumstances on the road. So this is what we teach the client. So drive the business. We'll go along with you and you just give us the feedback, whether it's the correct lane we're at, whether it's time to stop, and we are adopting it. So instead of flying in the rocket, drive with the car. And this corresponds to the very important Agile values that you might remember about. So one of the Agile values that states that instead of following the plan, which would be flying with the rocket, it's better to respond to changes, which would be driving the car, knowing your goals, but while you're driving, collecting the feedback, seeing the road, collecting the feedback from all the surroundings, collecting the feedback from the client, and then making changes. So the client should go with you along this way. So probably remember on the planning sessions we talked that Agile planning, it's not chaos. You do some sort of a planning. You have goals. But just those small adjustments is what you need to teach your client to be able to do, and also be able to collect all the feedback from your client as soon as possible, as much as possible, so that you can make the right turns on his way. Now, how this relationship is empowered in the Agile way of working? Well, I will introduce an event or the meeting, or sometimes it's called the ceremony, which is called the reviews. So it was described in actually the Scrum methodology, but I'm not a huge fan of stating the specific methodology you need to use. I would just say that create some sort of a rhythm, create a meeting, create a gathering where you will constantly review the product. Remember the essence of empirical way of working, inspecting and adapting. So this would be your way to inspect and adapt the product you create. So let's now today call it a review meeting where we review the product we created. So we created some sort of a increment, some small portion of a product that your client asks you to. So we finish the iteration, we want to give it to him. We have this gathering where we will review it. And we start with this gathering with the essence of what is actually the empirical way of working. Remember, in the very middle, there's transparency. So we very transparently, at the step number 1, we give our client the status of how things are going on. So we said, okay, this is done, this is done, this is done. But this, even though we promised to you that this will be already done, this is not done yet. Because of XYZ, various reasons happened. Maybe we overestimated our work. Maybe we're not capable of doing that. Maybe we didn't have tools to do this. A lot of things could happen, right? But we just transparently tell the client, so this is what we did, and this is what we did not do. And this is very important. This creates trust with the client. So I always encourage, whenever you meet a client and present a product, an increment of a product or a service, tell transparently to the client what you achieved and what you didn't manage to achieve. This creates trust. Now it's a time to actually show the customer of how this increment looks like, right? So step number 2, in the meeting, in the gathering, you do a demo. You basically bring the product and give it to the client and show him how it works. You say, okay, this is what we managed to create. This is how it looks like. This is how it works. This is the features. This is the things, how it makes things happen, and so on and so forth. So just introduce it and give it to the client to touch and feel and try. So in order to move to the step number 3, because in step number 3, after we showed it to the client, after the client, has been able to touch it and feel it and see it, he might give you a feedback, which we already talked about. The feedback, the short loop of a feedback that is very important and I just introduced. So you show the product, in return you get a feedback, because client may say, this looks very awesome, but just because you did a so good job, I came up with a new idea that we can put it here. Or maybe he says, well, I was expecting a bit different in this and this and that. Maybe let's tweak it a bit. Or maybe he says like, yeah, that's very good functionality. And even though I envisioned that something else it's needed, now I see it's not needed anymore. Let's keep it as it is here. So basically you collect all the feedback from the client, everything he's happy about, everything he's not happy about, his new thoughts, his thoughts about what is not even needed anymore, all of those things you just try to collect and register, right? Because this gives you a direction, the driving of further creation of the product or the service, right? Now, when the client gives his feedback, you say thank you to him, he potentially leaves. What you need to do also within the same meeting or gathering, don't forget to gather back with your team and do an adjustment of your working list. In Scrum or in Agile, we usually call it the backlog. So do the backlog adjustments, but it could be a simple list of the tasks that you have to finish the next iteration, right? So Aurimas previously told you about how the backlog is usually formed, how you do the planning, right, by using the backlog. So here you just make those adjustments after you get the feedback, after the review meeting. So you take something out if you think it's not important anymore. You prioritize something maybe as a more important thing that you previously thought. Maybe you put some new ideas here because client came up with something new things, right? You make sure you adjust your list of tasks, list of features you are asked to create. So in order to know what is the next step, the next iteration that you need to go. Because you just received the feedback, so now you know what the client expects. So, and this is very important because this empowers those short feedback loops. This empowers client to constantly come and tell his feedback, and it's not done in an ad hoc random way. It's done in a planned way. When, let's say, we gather once a week, every week. We gather maybe, okay, once in 2 weeks. Could be. But the idea is that client knows he needs to come to you, or that you will come to him. And you have this relationship that you will have a constant meetings with him, right? He knows that he needs to also be there to co-create with you. Because this is an important part of Agile client relationship, is co-creation with the client. Client needs to be part of the development process, of the creation process. He is the one that knows best what he wants, right? Because he is the one that asked for it. So co-create with your client by just doing a very often weekly, maybe bi-weekly meetings with him where you show him, do a review, and then you can react. So, very important things that I want to mention for the end is actually a couple just points to stress, is that I talked a lot about clients in this presentation, but I want to tell you that clients is not equal stakeholders. Sometimes you can have a much larger group of people around the project that it's not only your clients, not only your customers. It could be other stakeholders, maybe other teams that also needs to do something. Maybe people from other departments, maybe any other kind of stakeholders that could have a stake at it and should be interested in hearing of what you just did. So in these meetings as reviews and in general feedback that you get, ask for those feedback not only from your clients, do this for all kinds of stakeholders. So say, widen the group as much as possible. Do not make it too crowded, but if there is a stakeholder group, get at least one representative from each stakeholder group that you think is important for this project or for this service creation, right? So make sure that you do not only focus on clients, you also focus on stakeholders, because as Karolis introduced to you before, that could be a way of managing dependencies when you're creating something, right? So stakeholders is not equal clients. Now, the very important thing which I stressed in the first lecture of this series, and I want to stress again, is the transparency. Is the way of putting your client behind the glass wall where he can always see how is it going with their product creation. Why we need the glass wall, we don't want to give a complete freedom for the client to come at any point he wants and interrupt you in the middle of the work, right? We want to have some sort of boundaries. But we want him to be able to see transparently what's going on. So in this case, it's also very important to put team as close as possible to the client. Because even though we work in iterations, there might be questions for the team that arises that only client can answer. So we do this by asking questions, usually through some other roles that I will introduce you in a minute. But sometimes the team itself, why won't he would be able to just call a client and ask, okay, so do you want this button red or blue? Do you want this door of a car dark blue or light blue? It wasn't specified enough, right? So maybe the team should be able to access the client as much as they basically need. The client should be able to see the team all the time, maybe just not being able to interrupt them at any given point. So transparency is the key, and this setup you create, this relationship you create, that client is very close to the team is very close to the client. This eases up a development process. Now, for the very end, who is responsible for this creation of client relationships? Who is responsible for actually building all these nice things, right? Well, at the end is, of course, the whole team that's working is responsible. But usually in an Agile world, we give a role to one of the persons that could be named as a product owner, could be named as a product manager, could be named as, I don't know, sometimes it's an IT business analyst, maybe it's just a team leader or team manager, right? But we just give a role to one of the persons in the team that he will be the one building this relationship. He will be the one scheduling those review meetings, contacting the customer, agreeing with the customer on the next steps, on the next most important features. So he will be the one who will drive this relationship building with the client. So make sure you have one person who is, let's say, finally responsible for building relationships with the client, making sure he understands, the team understands what needs to be done, and the client understands of how the team works. because it's very important for the client to also understand how this Agile way of working is working, right? Now, for the very end, I just want to remind you on one other value of Agile that you might remember, and it's customer collaboration over negotiating contracts, right? So that's why in this whole lecture I talked about relationship, because for me, customer collaboration is relationship between the team that creates a product or a service and the customer or the client or any other stakeholder. Because we might focus on using a lot of time to negotiate things, but at the end, we want the client to collaborate with us to create this product. Now, we're not saying that contract negotiation is not important. You don't need to have contracts. You do. But make sure that within those contracts, you agree and you teach the client of how you will work. Maybe it will be, even in the contract, it will be mentioned that we will be co-creating. We will be meeting a lot in the review meetings. You need to give us feedback because this is how we all move forward, right? And focus then just on mentioning these key things, but then the main focus goes to customer collaboration ongoingly when we create a product. So these are the main key things I wanted to present to you today. So thank you for listening in for this fourth lecture of the series, but it's not the final lecture. So stay tuned because next up we'll move to continuous improvement, or in other words, how we can inspect and adapt the way we work, right? We just talked today about how we can inspect and adapt the product we create. So in the next lecture, my colleague will walk you through of how we can inspect and adapt and continuously improve on how we work. So thank you for listening in. My name is Šedys, and as always, if you feel that you want to discuss more about Agile, make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll definitely have a discussion together. So thank you and see you. Goodbye.